Welcome back, everybody. It is time for the weekend review, and happy Sunday. I know everybody had an amazing week last week. We absolutely dominated this market, or better yet, conquered this bad boy. So we're going to get into it today, and I'll tell you what, you can say a lot of things about me, but being wrong ain't one of them when it comes to the S&P. So we're going to talk about our short targets, and we're going to talk about what's to come. So right now, I'm going to go over SPX, VIX, and ES. We have hit all our short targets as of last week. And now I think we can potentially squeeze just to smack again. So we'll see what happens and what needs to happen in order for us to move higher, and what happens if we push lower. So let's go ahead and get right into it. First off, we're going to start with this epic call for the short that we had last week that was guiding us lower. As you guys know, I've been short for weeks, essentially riding the small pops up, but ultimately fading the higher touches so we can move down and sweep the leg lows. As you can see here, last week we called out the fact that we could not gain and we were coming down, and that we were still extremely bearish. And as you can see, we called out that they want to sweep the leg low, and we were talking about 66.27 first, then 65.84, and ultimately 65.25. So let's get right into that. As you guys know, we rode the short down last week. We took it all the way down 120 points as we got short FOMC day that we called out for everyone in the Discord room and, of course, in the Substack, from 67.30 all the way down to 67.11. Because why? Because one of our major targets was 66.27. 66.11 was the furthermost first target that paid 120 points, and it paid it very handsomely. As you guys know, especially the Discord room and the post-market breakdown subscribers, we were able to cash in over 400% on SPY options just by holding this overnight, which was an absolute banger of a trade. So now that we've captured that and we understand exactly what we did last week, here's what we really want to focus on. And as you guys know, 65.25 played to the tick, so let's get into that and show you right now. This is a monthly view on ES, and ultimately we will get into this when we get back to ES. But I wanted to show you guys the ultimate target that we were aiming for, which was a sweep of the monthly and weekly leg low at 65.25. You could see they played it almost perfectly. They went through this level by about 1 or 2 ticks, which was ultimately our big high time frame short target. We played this and then popped up quite significantly after hours for almost 65 points. Which we're going to get into right now on what is the possibility of what could happen. So first and foremost, as always, let's go ahead and get into VIX, and then we'll go into SPX. So as many of you guys know, we have been watching this 2174 weekly for quite some time, as it was our big above-below pivot that ended up being our floor. And this has held us up for weeks now as we've continued to stay above this area in our $20 handle. The other big part was the 2470 monthly level that, as you guys know, I have talked about this level till we are blue in the face. This thing has created a massive downward push by being above this. In VIX has created a lot of headwind for the indices, and so simply staying above it has been troublesome for the ES, and it will continue to be that as we move into the week. However, let me point out one thing. As we're continuing to progress up, we needed the daily time frame to close above 27.85 in order to continue the move up, and they currently have not as of yet. Not only that, but on the 4-hour time frame, they had the ability to also close above here to gain on the 4-hour, and they have not done that. And they couldn't even close above the sub leg here at the 4-hour, which also leads me to believe that we could have some potential weakness. Now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen until Monday's open, but I will tell you this. Not being able to gain on the 4-hour or the daily time frame, just as we've talked about on the ES, is an extremely bearish ordeal here. So there is a good possible chance that if we squeeze this week, now that we've swept all the lows, that VIX can absolutely fade, and we are going to use this 2470 once again as our big above-below trigger. The only difference here now is I have nothing untested below this. If we do squeeze, VIX could come down quite significantly. We are still going to use 2470 as our big above below, and now we have an upside barometer or ceiling to watch to push above, which would be the 2785 on VIX. If we can get a 4-hour or daily close up here, we could push all the way up to 3512, but one step at a time, and that remains to be seen. As you guys can see right now, we are currently pulling back as of the close on Friday, so what will happen is hard to tell. Again, we gained on the 1 hour time frame, but I don't really concern myself with that. What I am more concerned about is no gain on the weekly or daily time frames. Again, guys, I want to make one thing clear. I am still very much bearish on the ES overall. However, that does not mean that we will not pop and squeeze. We have a tendency to sweep these leg lows, grab liquidity, and pop back up for hundreds of points. And that is exactly what we saw on Friday. Once again, they swept our leg low target. So I do believe that we could have a nice squeeze ahead of us this week, which we will soon get into. And right now, VIX is kind of pointing that direction, as you can see, with being unable to gain on the daily or 4 hour time frame. But once again, before I get ahead of myself, because we never know, we're going to use this 2785 for a big below on the upside pivot, and really the 2470 is going to be our new floor. If we push below this, the indices are going to get a significant tailwind and push much higher. So that is what you got for VIX here. Now let's go ahead and get into SPX, and I'll show you what's cooking. As you can see, SPX has now made a downside move and has swept our major weekly, monthly leg low, just like I showed you in ES. This was a monster move to the downside, and we have cleanly swept this area now. I do believe after a sweep like this that we could grab some liquidity and potentially move higher. We will see what happens, but as you can see, we are still very much pointed to the downside. As we come into the weekly time frame here, you can see that really what we need to do is get back above 65.52 ultimately for a little continuation. So let's go ahead down into the daily time frame as I show you what's going on here. And this will really open your eyes. This is our big swing low at 65.21. This is going to be a huge spot for us to maintain above. But ultimately we have 65.52 and we have the 65.55 daily weekly combo. This is going to be a very difficult spot for us to get above. However, if we do get above this spot, we will cleanly push up to 66.02. And then we will see what happens once again. However, above 66.32, we will come all the way into our higher leg area here at around 66.96 and potentially all the way to 67.22. I'm going to show you a little something here is how I'm looking at this. I do believe we could come all the way to the higher end of this leg, somewhere around 6,700. This is our current leg down right here. As you guys can see, they continuously retrace these legs as we continue to push down. They pop up, they test the highs, they push down, they pop up, they test the highs, we push down, they pop up, we test the highs, we push down, right? So why should anything be any different? Here's our current leg low. If they pop up, we need to get back above 65.52. We deal with 6,600, but ultimately above 66.32, we go all the way up to the 66.96 to 67.22 area. I do truly believe this is a major smack spot in our ultimate bullish target, but we have to take it one step at a time and see what happens. Let me go down to the 4 hour time frame and show you what I'm looking at here. And it becomes very apparent that, as you can see, above 65.55, we push directly into 66.02 or 66.06. This is our current 4 hour leg down, and I do anticipate a reaction here. As long as price stays above 65.52, it could potentially pop back up, break back above 66.32, and then this is where we get into our main area of congestion here between 66.96 and let's just call it 67.39, and ultimately I'm looking at the 67.15 area as our major spot here, guys. So this is what I'm looking at for potential retracement and potential reaction areas as long as we walk up these individual steps, okay? So that's what I got for SPX. Now let's just go ahead and get into ES and I'll break it down for you. And it looks very similar, but again, we have to have all precautions here, and I'm going to show you something a little interesting that you've never seen before. So simply looking at the weekly time frame, you can see the 66.25 is actually the ETH low. This is the RTH candle here, and we, like I said, swept it perfectly. Boom, our target was on point for the high time frame target. Now what happens? Well, the big kicker for us on ES is to get back above 66.27. If they are able to get back above 66.27, we will push much higher into the upper side of this leg and potentially all the way in to 67.61. Now, one step at a time, this is going to be a very large area for us to get above. And as I break down the daily and 4-hour time frames, it becomes much more clear. But from a weekly perspective, that is what we're aiming for. Now, if they end up pushing lower, guys, if they end up pushing lower, we will come to 64.74 directly. A break below 65.25 takes us immediately there. There is not much support below this. And to be honest, this area of congestion is a lot of strength, but we really got to dig in to find something untested, which we'll do when the time comes. So let's go ahead and take it down to the daily time frame, show you guys what I'm looking at here. So this is my daily time frame, as you can see. As you guys know, I had in the trade plan that we wanted to play 65.16.75 as the daily and get back above 65.25 for the squeeze higher. Well, they didn't quite get the 65.16. They actually missed it by about 9 points, but they did sweep that low by just a few ticks, and we squeezed back higher. So the very first area that we're going to look to get above when the Globex opens is 65.8150. As you can see, we closed here at 65.75 on the cash session. Now we actually are above this on the ETH session through Globex, which we're going to talk about. So getting above 61 is going to be our first big target. And why is that big? Well, I forgot to show you guys this, and we'll do it now, but we have a monster weekly value area low at 65.15, and ultimately our next big resistance and area to get back above is the 66.27 and the 66.33.25. If we can maintain price above 65.81, this will be our first target in our big major area of resistance. Getting above this essentially clears us to go all the way up to 67.23 once it jumps over 66.8150, and ultimately up to potentially 67.87.75. Once again, this is our leg down, just like I showed you with SPX. And I will draw it out for you one more time to show you how these patterns consistently play out, right? So this was our leg down, this was a leg down, this is a leg down. What did we do? We popped up, we smacked the highs, we come down, we make a new low. We pop up, we smack the highs, we come down, we make a new low. Now we're maintaining over this daily. This is our big resistance at 33. If we push over this, where do we go? We go to 81, bounce back here, deal with 23, come up here, and then this is our major area of interest up in here, right around 67.61 to 67.87. All right, so now let's break it down into the smaller time frame so you guys can see what's cooking, and I will show you something really cool and something really valuable for you to understand here. So guys, this is the 4-hour ETH session. This traded obviously up until the 5 p.m. close on Friday. And actually, before I do that, let me just show you this. This is the weekly TPO, right? So you guys can see here that to this left, we have a massive weekly value area low at 65.85. This actually played last week as support and popped us up like a couple hundred points. Now getting back above that is going to be a significant ordeal, as there is also a daily level here, which I showed you, which we'll soon talk about. The other big spot for us to get above, do you see the 67.33.75 previous weekly value area low, right? That also lines up with the previous week's value area low. So we have double value area lows here. We have a massive area here that is a what I would call an inefficiency in this weekly profile that all needs filled in. So if we get above 33.75, you better believe they will fill all this in, essentially targeting the weekly POC at 67.49.25. This is an inevitable if they get above the 633 spot. And so let's go back to that 4-hour time frame and show you exactly what I'm looking at here, because once we put the pieces of the puzzle together for you, it will become very clear. All right, so here's the daily at 61, and here is the daily at 81, and the previous weekly value area low at 65.85. And then there's that big daily touch I told you about. Well, check this out. Now, here is the current last week's previous week value area low, 66.3375. It goes in line with our weekly at 66.27, which you can clearly see I have labeled that says squeeze above, right? And then, of course, our daily at 66.3325 is our line in the sand. That means that we will push higher or move lower if we stay below. We have a 4-hour level located at 66.2950 as well. But look at this massive volume profile that I threw on here. You can see there is a huge volume node here that makes it very clear for us that we have a significant shelf to get over, but once they get over it, just like I showed you with the weekly TPO, we should continue to traverse all the way up. Now, our next big spot, our big hurdle, which is very much tested but kept us suppressed last week, was the daily at 66.8150. I do not expect this daily to be a problem. It will more than likely get a reaction due to its significance, but a push above this will easily send us up into the daily at 67.2350. There's also a 4-hour at 67.2825. And ultimately, I do think this area will get a reaction. How heavy, I'm not sure. It is a 4-hour leg up right here, and there is a lot of confluence in this particular spot. I would be watching this area very heavily for a reaction. However, if they move above 67.28, we get into that weekly point of control, which would ultimately be our target. But then, as you guys can see, and I drew it on the higher time frame, this is our leg down, guys. This is our big leg down. This is the leg end up here, 67.87. So somewhere between 66.61 and 67.87, I do anticipate a fairly large reaction if it doesn't come from 67.23. How I would play this is the 67.87 to me is the prime location. I would look for it to get back below 61 for a push lower, and then a push below 23 would be our confirmation, and then ride down 81s, etc. We just use these supports for above or below. When they're tested but they're significant, they become great monitors for price action for us to understand where we are moving in terms of momentum. So that's what I've got for you guys. We talked about the amazing short last week, the targets, and now we've talked about VIX, SPX, and ES. I've given you my theory and my philosophy why I think that we could potentially squeeze. I said this 100 times last week, both in the post-market breakdowns and in the trade plans. If you cannot make a new high, if you cannot gain support, you have to go lower and sweep the lows to grab buyers and try again. Well, what did they do? I showed you guys specifically on all time frames right now that we have now swept the very largest swing low on the monthly weekly for both SPX and for ES, and now they have grabbed new liquidity. It is time to get a pop and go back up and test something that is untested, which is that highest leg that we talked about somewhere up in here for ES. So I hope this makes it very clear for you guys. Again, just because this is my anticipation does not mean that it will happen. Use these significant levels for above below. I also have one more thing I want to show you that is kind of giving me a little feeling that this may happen. As you guys know, I'm big into data and statistics. Everything that we do is based off of data. We don't do off opinions or feelings. And so this was very interesting. This fired on Friday, talking about this has only happened twice in 30 years. We had 18 oversold conditions fire simultaneously. And essentially what they're saying is that, well, the data shows is that we have a high probability of a pop over not only the next day, but over the next 10 days. I feel like these percentages are a little bit overcooked, but at the end of the day, the way I'm looking at it is the 10-day return. The worst in the whole possible setup is 3%. That basically takes us back up to 6,700 on SPX, which is ultimately what I'm looking at. Also, which is interesting, 92.6% of the time, prices reclaimed the monthly fair value, which is point of control in 10 days. That also is 67.07 on SPX right now. So very interesting, guys. I love this data. Again, this is high time frame data when I put this stuff out. This is not something you immediately act upon, but you use it in terms with our process. Again, data never overrides the process, but I've been waiting for this sweep. I saw this data come through, and I truly believe we could possibly squeeze because, again, I was looking for the sweep to find new buyers anyway. Now that's happened. Now we have some serious oversold indications, and so that is obviously something that I think everybody should be aware of. Also, a heads up, I just dropped a new indicator this morning on TradingView. Check it out. It's called the TWAP SPX TWAP Edge. I just sent out a mass mailer. It is also in the Discord room. You can check Twitter for the link, and Substack and Substack notes. This is essentially VWAP for SPX. As people may or may not know, we do not have VWAP on SPX because there is technically no volume, right? So SPX is an options-based index, and so we don't have any real volume. So what institutions do is they use something called TWAP, which is the time-weighted average price. It is essentially the same thing, but it's based on time, almost like our TPO, if you want to think about it that way. And what I've done is created a multi-time frame that you can look at the daily, weekly, and monthly TWAPs, and you can get the deviation bands. If you guys are looking at SPX, this is a must-have. I certainly suggest you go to my profile and download this. This is free, and it's a big deal. So I'm constantly watching SPX. We talk about it every single day, and I hope that those of you who are following along are looking at it as well. And understanding where we're at in value for SPX is extremely important. So make sure you grab that. I'll put the link in this post so that you guys can get that and go from there. So you guys have an excellent Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Look for where we open on Sunday. Tonight, it'll be very interesting. And of course, on Monday will be the big deal for above or below our major weeklies. It is possible that we open above those and squeeze. But anything can happen. I don't know what geopolitical events happened over the weekend. All I know is right now I'm long SPY, and I'm fingers crossed that we continue to squeeze up. So we'll see what happens, and I will catch you guys on Monday for the post-market breakdown, and the trade plan will be in your inbox Tuesday at 8:30 in the morning. For those of you guys who are unaware, this is the trade plan for Monday. The string will be at the bottom. You guys have a great one, and have an excellent weekend. Cheers.